Let's get started. It's a couple minutes after, which I wanted to give people arriving. So can you hear me in the back? Okay. I wanted to give people arriving later because of the parking, so we may have a few people come in a bit later. This presentation is about Blackwater. How many people here are on the debate team or the debate club? Okay, a few. Come on in. Yes. So, introduce myself. My name is Raymond Lutz. I am from the East County, near El Cajon, but not in it. My academic background is I have a master's degree in electronics engineering from San Diego State University, and I run a company called Cognizant doing medical devices. It's a small company, and I just wrote this book, which you're encouraged to buy. Plug in here, called Coils of the Serpent, which has nothing whatever to do with what I'm going to talk about today, except for that it has some mercenary armies in it. It's a novel. Now, let me go to this side because I think it's going to be better for me over here. And the book, basically, I just want to mention DNA is that in ancient documents. This would be something that if you're somebody that follows ancient documents like biblical texts and so forth, you may ask the question, does it mention DNA, not but literally, but by the story of what it is. Now, the group that I started a while back is called Citizens Oversight Projects Committee, and this is the group that helps citizens to get involved with their government. Now, as a citizen in a democracy, it's your duty to oversee the entire government. Unfortunately, that's impossible, as we know, since nobody can even tell you how big it is. However, if you decide to take part in this, what you need to do is identify a body somewhere, like the board here, city council, planning group, or something, and start going. So go to every meeting and just be the citizen in the room. In many of these meetings, no one is there at all. No one from the public is there, and it's just officials sitting around a table making decisions. And for you, how much tax you're going to pay and so forth. Immediately, we found religious and partisan videos played at the El Cajon government channel. They'd been playing for 4 years. We said no. They immediately pulled them. But they'd played for 4 years, so we had to actually keep track of these things. Then we started attending the Potrero planning group, and this is when we got involved with Blackwater, helping them out. I want to give you a brief history of Blackwater, and basically this presentation is chronological. The whole thing I'm going to go through is a time series. We're going to go back before we knew about Blackwater here, and the Prince family here in Chicago, Lake Michigan, and this is Holland, Michigan, named because the people came from the Dutch Reformed Church, a very conservative church group that wanted to set up shop there and make a conservative culture. Following strict Calvinist doctrines. And if you follow any of that, you know Calvin was the ones who went into witch burnings and so forth. The father, Edgar Prince, father of Erik Prince, in 1934 founded this Prince Industries and was very successful in the auto parts industry. My hat's off to them. Their signature product was a lighted vanity mirror. If you have one of these mirrors that lights up, then you're supporting, their legacy. And then the kids grew up in Holland in that household. And before Erik struck out on his own with Blackwater, I just want you to tie that family into what's happened in our country recently from a political standpoint. First of all, the sister, Betsy Prince, married this guy, Dick DeVos, who inherited all of Amber. So this is a multi-billion-dollar company that he inherited, that he basically inherited it. And he went up against Jennifer Granholm in Michigan in the last sitting, $41 million, a record for a governor's race. And he lost. The public saw through that. He also started, Edgar Prince started Gary Bauer, this guy, with the Family Research Council, which is a right-wing group too, which actually was a co-author of Project for a New American Century. Who's heard about that in here? Project for a New American Century. Only a couple people. This is the game plan used by Bush after 9/11, which said we need some sort of a new Pearl Harbor to get our defense industry back on track. So he was a co-author of that. And of course, they also funded James Dobson's Focus on the Family. And this is a guy who said that SpongeBob, he wanted to ban SpongeBob because he thought he was gay. You know, the relationship with Patrick. Of course, the answer was SpongeBob was a sponge, and that shouldn't be a problem. So why did it happen? The reason this happened is because the military privatization occurred under the base realignment and closure program set up by Dick Cheney. This happened back under George H.W. Bush, the father of our past president. This started actually under Reagan to support a concept of recruited military. They say volunteer. No one's a volunteer, really. You have to stay in. You're a contractor, and you're recruited. So it's not, the term volunteer military is really a misnomer. So they set this up, a recruited full-time military that would be all ready to go. And they closed a lot of the bases, $10 billion reduction, opening the door for Halliburton to take over a lot of those support services. And then Cheney became the CEO after he left the administration. So he went directly from changing the entire military situation into to then taking over one of the biggest companies that took advantage of that. And then during the Clinton era, it continued, and we were left with inadequate training capability. People agree that they closed too much. Is what they have. Now, there's a line that people want to draw between public and private, and this is kind of the academic part of my talk. That's not timeline at all. Do you want to put stuff in the public sector, like this organization, a public institution, is controlled by a governing body and paid for by taxpayer money? Or do you want to put things in a private sector, private institutions, and so forth? So you got to figure out where you want to put it. What's the philosophy for putting something in a private sector or public sector? Most people don't even know. They think everything should go in a private sector, or complete socialism, everything in a public sector. But actually, you want to put certain things in private and certain things in public. As I said, taxpayer funded or not, citizens can provide oversight. If it's public, it's public. This is private. You don't get to know what they're doing. This is greed incentive. Greed is good if it's for good things that you want to have happen more. Greed's not good if you don't want it to happen more. This is public sector, I claim, is needed if the product or service has severe or long-lasting impacts if it's done wrong. Education done wrong, you lose out. It's not like a brick wall that you can tear down and build again. Your life is over. You can't repeat those years. So I claim that public sector is a must for security, military, fire protection, and police. You don't want your firefighters paid more when there's a fire. The firefighters, they start fires to make more money. In fact, they taught people that where the firefighters employed, they start a fire because they can make more money. So it's a real big problem if our security is based on greed. You have military based on greed, like they're going to make more ships and so forth, or they get to be deployed more. Guess what? We have wars that last forever because they make more money the longer they go on. This is what we're seeing in Iraq. A war that won't stop because they're making more money the longer they can keep it going. And I guarantee some of those events over there are caused by the people that are making money, just like starting fires. Need to go on. So that's philosophy. They went through a gut and privatized phase here under, well, here's my point. And, you know, Tom DeLay said, make government so small that you can drown it in the bathtub. Kind of a bad picture. I don't know what this guy's history is about drowning things in the bathtub. But, you know, that's what he said. And they Did. Halliburton, KBR took over military logistics. FEMA, gutted. So it was worthless. Couldn't do anything in Katrina. Wilderness, devalued, and private development emphasized. They want to privatize the wilderness. And then Blackwater, Triple Canopy, and DynCorp are used instead of conventional military forces. Am I against the military? No. I like public military. I'm not against the people that say, I went in the military because I'm a patriot. These guys are going in so they can make more money. And that's not the right way. Erik Prince then had a history as a SEAL. And he was deployed, and in 207 he moved and started Blackwater. Real old guy, they had lots of experience. I'm just kidding. This picture I had a hard time getting because it wasn't until Waxman's oversight hearings that I could get it. Now, what happened is Edgar Prince died in '95. The next year, the corporation that he started was sold for $1.35 billion. Johnson Controls bought it, and Erik got $500 million in cash. Now, he could have done a lot of good with that money. He decided to start Blackwater Lodge and Training Center. Located, here's Richmond, here's Washington, D.C., East Coast. Here's a border between North Carolina and, what's this right above it? Virginia. Okay, it's right there, right on the border. Yeah, okay, here it is, it says Virginia. Here's Moyock, and it's actually right here, about 7,000 acres. And they said, just drive over the state line and listen for the sound of gunfire to find it, hopefully. And they wanted to run the shooting ranges till midnight, and then finally the residents complained. This is a shot of their facility in North Carolina from a plane, with shooting ranges all along here, water training in this area. So basically, this is a private military boot camp where they can train their own military for whatever they want. How many people here ever watch 24? Do you see the new season? Only a couple people. Interesting to watch that. It's on whatever night it is. But they have a Blackwater lookalike. I think it's called Stockwell or something. And they're basically taking over, trying to take over. So it's a good example of what might happen. They profit from disaster each time. They started training military and government law enforcement, the kind of thing they're proposing here in conjunction with the college. Then when Columbine Massacre occurred, they set up a high school so that they could train people how to secure it, how to take it down and get all the youth secure, the violent youth of America. They got a listing in GSA, so they made $111 million instead of the $125,000 they said they might make. Someone said they might make. After the USS Cole attack, remember this picture? This is when the terrorists came up in 2000 and blew a hole in the side of one of the ships, the USS Cole. Then they got a $37.5 million Navy contract to train the Navy on how to handle guns to possibly fight against terrorists on board ship. Question, why can't the Navy train the sailors themselves? Why are they giving out this expensive contract to Blackwater? It's because they were in bed with the Bush administration, I think. And then after 9/11 resulted in an explosion in war privatization. Billions of dollars. And they've taken part of it. So then they transferred from being just a training firm over to also setting up their own soldier groups, their own platoons of soldiers that they could deploy for hire. They don't like to say mercenary, but that's what a mercenary is. And it's different than the logistics contracting that KBR does, for example, doing the laundry and feeding the soldiers somewhere. Setting up your own military platoons, that's different. So in 2002, they started this. So this is what a true mercenary soldier suppliers. Other countries, they don't mind calling themselves mercenaries. Aegis of Britain, they're very open about it. This guy here, Buzzy Krongard, gave them their first big contract in this way. He was noted that his bank that he headed until '98 was responsible for the high put options on United Airlines. Put option, if anybody is a financial major or whatever in here, means you're betting that stock will go down in the stock market. You can make money either way. Price goes up, price goes down. You can bet that the price goes down. The way you do it is you borrow someone's stock, sell it, buy it back later, and you give it back. It's totally crazy that they do this. But then you're making money when it falls. They had really high put options just before 9/11, like they knew what was going on. Okay, just a little tidbit there. So they wanted to become the private security firm, kind of like FedEx is to the post office. They guarded L. Paul Bremer III during his stay in Iraq. And as I'll tell you later, this happened because Rumsfeld, you know, he was the Secretary of Defense, right? And you had Rice, Condoleezza Rice, who was the State Department Secretary. Well, they didn't get along. They had a spat. She could not get any protection. Of course, Iraq was supposed to be all healed up by then, as according to the media was misrepresenting who they said. But the fact is that it was much more out of control over there than they thought. And so Condoleezza Rice says, well, screw you, Rumsfeld. I'm going to go get my own protection. I'm going to go hire Blackwater. So it was a good reason for her to actually do this because Rumsfeld wasn't cooperating and we had too few people available. This picture is very important with the war. This was in March 31st, 2004. Contractors were strung up on this bridge, killed, ambushed, and murdered and strung up here. Now, when I first saw this, I thought, contractor, I thought they were building something. You know, that's what contractors do over here. No, these were Blackwater contractors. They were deployed to go through the city of Fallujah in a very red area that no one would go through, too dangerous. They were actually deployed, in my view, as bait, set up as bait to go in there and get ambushed, so that then they could take down that city of Fallujah. These were people that were brand new to Blackwater and were kind of disliked amongst the group. They put only 2 people in each car. They didn't have a rear gunner. They weren't allowed to sight their weapons. They had no maps. They weren't given any support and still put through this red area. One of the teams said, no, we're not going through that red area, and they went around. They lived. This group died, and then they had to go into to take down Fallujah. Then they had the excuse. The Bush administration said, okay, now we can take the city down to its knees, and that's exactly what they did. Then this guy did Order 17, which granted the foreign contractors, including Blackwater, full immunity from all laws in Iraq, so they didn't have to follow the laws there. The family sued Blackwater. This is not over. This case is still open today. I just had a news article I saw today. Blackwater said they can't be sued by the families who just died. You know, if you were in the military, you would get $100,000 or something, a big compensation for dying over there. Your family gets something. Not if you work for Blackwater. It rips off people that work for them. Another reason I'm against them. Now, they say they're part of the total force and they can't be regarded as, and they have to be regarded as part of the military. Meanwhile, they say they're civilians and they're not subject to the Code of Military Justice. They're not civilian nor military. They fit nowhere. It was in process and then referred to the Supreme Court and then back to arbitration and then back into the courts and now it's back into arbitration. Ken Starr tried to look into Clinton Zipper for about, what, several years? $40 million. Whitewater. Now he's representing Blackwater. That's kind of a curious fact. J. Cofer Black, 28-year in the CIA, criticized for not passing to the FBI information about the 9/11 hijackers. He was criticized. Somehow he was in on something there. Counterterrorism and the state coordinator, and then became Blackwater vice chair. And by the way, was on Mitt Romney's campaign committee. So, if you didn't like Blackwater, you weren't voting for Mitt Romney. Luckily, he didn't win. Otherwise, Blackwater would have been maybe even more severe. Katrina. This was actually why I got started and active in politics after I saw this disaster. They deployed forces domestically to suppress looting. Most of those people were looking for water and food. There were very few that were actually looking for widescreen TVs. Those people were actually just hungry and thirsty and stranded. So what happened is they got a $73 million contract. They actually went in there without a contract at first and started working. And then they got a contract later. They made $243,000 a day. Each Blackwater person received $950. No, the Blackwater total, they got $950 per day per soldier. They paid $350 to the soldier and pocketed $600. Now that's what I call highway robbery. The administrative fees should not be more than almost double, right? It's almost double what the guy was being paid for his actual expenses. This is what you call legalized stealing from the taxpayer. Happens all the time. Clearwater, what happened here? I'm missing a slide. I don't know why it's not there. It was about the installation in Illinois. Clearwater started NoPrivateArmies.org. It's about 100 miles west of Chicago. They participated in several rallies. But coming up, April 25th, 2009, that's in a couple of weeks, right? Jeremy Scahill's going to be and some others, and we're going to be setting a video update up to their... They don't want the expansion in their Illinois area either. And there's several other places. Now we're going to go over to what happened here in San Diego County. This is a valley called Round Potrero Valley. It's 824 acres. There's a little tiny house right there.
Where's Potrero?
I'll show you in a second. I hope so. Well, I'll tell you it's east of San Diego, about an hour on 94. You know where 94 is?
Yeah.
Just keep taking that. It turns into a 2-lane road. Once it turns into 2 lanes, go for another 40, 50 minutes, and you'll be there. And you have to be really quick because once you're there, there's only one little store. It's a very small place. This is the valley though over the hill, which you cannot see, and I'll show you in a second. I do have some satellite images. Near the border, within like a mile or two of the border, they admitted that they wanted border security contracts. You know, that's why they wanted by the border. They actually are bidded in a $1.4 billion war on drugs training for south of the border drug interdiction people. And if you talk to people from Mexico about drug interdiction and how close they are to the cartels, they explain that one day you have the drug interdiction person, the next day they're a drug cartel person. You know, they switch, and because the drugs are still so lucrative. And also because these guys are so strongly religious, you know, background, at least they preach that way. Good for Armageddon, I thought was maybe what they were doing. Here is where the valley is. It's right by these Hauser Wilderness additions. This is the Hauser Wilderness area, and this is the wet Garber Box, and it's part of a chain of important valleys up in the mountains. You don't want to develop all of your valleys. You have to keep some of them for your water and so forth. You need some things that are not developed. Here's where it is. Here's Potrero. The border's right here. And San Diego is about right there, okay, if you follow this map over. Here's the Pacific Crest Trail. You know, this is where John Muir set up the trail from border to border, goes from Mexico to Canada, within just a few miles. So what was their proposal? 300 students a week who come through, 10 carbine ranges and 5 pistol ranges. This is directly off of their documentation. Now they change stuff, you know, midstream. I think there's another chair here. Look around, there's a couple of chairs still. And shoot houses they were going to build, a 2-mile track, Vaseline storage tank. You can read them all there. Had a chopper pad set up. These pictures just from random places. And then they wanted to build like a urban simulation area out of these type of containers and have towers set up for training of this kind. And then this is what gets me, 18,000 square feet. That's 100 feet by 180 feet, almost half an acre, for an armory. You know, here's a little store with all kinds of guns. You can see how many you can put in there. How much space do they need for an armory? That's what I was worried about, and many others. Then they're going to build enough that's equivalent to 57 average-sized homes. 170,000 square feet they wanted to put into this valley. Residents there are saying, no, It was an agricultural preserve, and they said that it was a utility to get it by this planning boundary. But the use is more like a 300-room hotel. You'd have 300 people staying in this valley all the time. Noise with 300 weapons firing a lot. Sometimes, like I said, in North Carolina, they wanted it till midnight. You go up to Potrero, it's dead quiet. You can hear a pin drop. You have somebody fire a weapon even 5 miles away, you'd probably hear it. This watershed destruction is very important, and more importantly, fire danger. You'll see in a second, the fire went right up to this. This armory would probably go up like an atom bomb, you know, if you had a fire come through like it did. And of course, there's an impact of the wildlife. There's golden eagles nearby. They sighted condors. How much they spent trying to reposition these condors? Probably millions and millions of dollars. They finally got 10 pairs set up. And one was sighted nearby. These guys would be out there probably shooting at these things. As I say, establishing private armies is not a good solution for our security. This is a full philosophical underpinning that people who don't even live in the area say, I'm not for anything like this. I do not want Blackwater or any of these private contractors in play. However, even if you like the idea of private mercenary armies, you think they're a good thing. Some people say, I want to privatize everything. Still, it wasn't a good place for it. This is a really important valley up there. So now, what happened, I just want to point out a few things. They actually met with Diane Jacob and Duncan Hunter, the father, who's now out of office. You know, he ran for presidency early on in May. Then they submitted their project. In October, they finally went into Potrero and said, here's our project. November, this is what gets me. Lori Spar, there's a picture of her. She was working for Blackwater as their attorney, okay, in one meeting, representing Blackwater, hired her firm. The next month, she comes back, she decides to throw off her lawyer career. Can you imagine that? You work to get your be an attorney, you finally get in a company, you're making good money, then you say, I'm going to blow that off, I'm going to go back to work for the county in Department of Planning and Land Use where I used to work, and happen to work on the Blackwater project for Blackwater. This is what, you find this sort of slime seeping into every crack. She sat in the meeting by her former boss and acted like they'd never met. Then when we complained, she was dropped from the project, but they said they weren't going to fire her from the county. She probably doesn't work there anymore. I guarantee she's probably an attorney again at this point, even though I haven't looked into it. Then in December, the Potrero Planning Group decided to vote 7-0 to approve it contingent on live fire noise test. Jan Hedlund, this nice woman here, she was the only opponent to the project. In January, she was sworn in. But in March, they decided to drop the noise test. If you look at the media, you hear Potrero approved project, no condition. But it was conditional. And then they never did the condition. At about that same time, Christmas 2006, this guy, Andrew Moonen, a Blackwater guard, 28 years old, shot and killed a 32-year-old bodyguard of the vice president in Iraq. He was in a drunken stupor following a Christmas party. He was quickly flown out of the country, and you can't find a picture of this guy, no information about this because they covered it up. So one of Blackwater's guards in cold blood murdered this guy. They covered the whole thing up. March 2009, the widow of the victim filed suit in federal court against this firm and for covering it up. This happened just last week. I had to update this presentation just last week. Actually, I was doing it today before I came in because the information is coming out so fast. This is not a long time in history. So the county decides to revamp their entire processing. They decided to throw out the archaeological criteria, biological, air quality, groundwater, EIR format, content, historical, noise, transportation, everything. They decided to throw it out and redo it, changing all the criteria. This is like impossible for the public to follow. We're trying to struggle with following Blackwater. All of a sudden the county says we're changing everything. Blackwater West is one of the first projects to go through the system. New rules for friends with lots of money. So you have a lot of money, the county goes, oh, we're going to juggle everything. The county, no one can follow anything there. scoping meeting, there was 125 people, a lot of them, first time in their life they've ever been protesting, coming from the community saying, you know, one would say, gee, it looks like a done deal. I don't like it, but no one else does. It seems like they all like it. The neighbor says, no, I don't like it either. We both don't like it. Well, maybe some other people don't like it. They start talking, and they find out like 70% of the people aren't for it. Parking lot, they locked it, so the protesters had to park like a mile or two down the street. They said there was a bomb placed under Ray Chris's car in Murrieta. Later, they said this. They said we were responsible. Unfortunately, we don't know how to set bombs under cars in Murrieta, but I know who does. DPLU reported threatening phone calls as if the Stop Blackwater group was doing that. I tried to get information from Riverside Sheriff's Department about the bomb. They wouldn't give me any information much. So we heard then that Blackwater was halted in the Philippines. In the Philippines, here's a picture of the whole Philippine island chain. And up here, I've blown this up right here. That's Subic Bay, and here's the base. There's the airport. Anyway, somewhere around there. They scrapped the idea of their jungle training camp. Now they have an international arm called Greystone Limited that will do mercenary operations for anybody. Anybody. So we luckily had a few things going in our favor. Bob Filner worked with us very well. I understand he's going to probably be coming to the next meeting that we have here for the campus to say a few words to the board. I got a resolution to the county party to block them. We were supposed to have a meeting on April 12th up in Potrero. Gordy Hammers, this guy, said he couldn't do it. It was like a week or two after Easter. He says he had travel plans during Easter. He couldn't do it. We called him and he was home. Lied to us. I got on Democracy Now. Who's watched Democracy Now in this room? Okay, anybody else that hasn't, you need to go watch it for at least 2 weeks of your life. democracynow.org, and you will learn more than you've ever learned from any other news program in a year. Then, just 3 days later, we had Earth Fair. We had all these booths. So you see, look, 9, 10, 11, 12, 19, 22. It's all in 1 month. All this stuff happens. Then, later that month, we had the Democratic Convention in town. Huge number of delegates that they all learning about Blackwater because I put the resolution forward, but it was late, meaning I didn't submit it 30 days in advance. And then Ted Smith objected to it, so they couldn't do it. This is the same guy that requested a quorum count, counting everybody in the room to see if they had a quorum just before they had a pull funding from Iraq resolution. So kind of a strange guy, Ted Smith III. We researched him. We had this news conference. You can see it here out on the street. There's Jan Hedlund, Bob Filner, myself. Blackwater has this boat out in the bay, entertaining the other Democratic VIPs. They've since been using this ship to pick up anti-pirate contracts of some kind. Have you heard about these anti-pirate things? Sometimes I wonder who's behind them. Kind of like the viruses. You know, you get in your computer. Is it the virus fighting programs? You know, McAfee, are they starting a lot of viruses? So you have to buy their program? Could be. Now, see, I did that again. Okay, we had 3 days later, Jeremy Scahill came to town. He's the guy that wrote this book, Blackwater. Okay, which is mostly about the incident in Fallujah. Had 425 people attend his talk, and he went out to Potrero and saw the site. We had another 350 the next day in La Mesa. So a lot of interest in this. Then in May 10th, they had a Potrero Planning Group meeting with full house, 3 sheriff's people on hand, protesters outside. Really crazy. They had 300 signatures from the community. There's only 825 people that live there. So 300 is a huge percentage of all the people that live there. And at that meeting, 6 of the members, everybody except for Jen Henlon, was served with recall notices. They were going to be up for recall. Mary Johnson decided she'd wear her Blackwater t-shirt in the front of, at the dais, on the front table, just so she could point out how unbiased she was. Gordon Hammers acted like he worked for Blackwater. He'd answer all the questions that were sent to Blackwater. He'd answer them instead. I'll answer that for Blackwater. We had this other guy, Covert Canyon, which you probably should have named it Happy Acres, and no one would have cared at that point. But it's a shooting range out near, actually near, here it is. It's actually near Alpine, which would be right there. And he has a shooting range. And actually, I got to know this guy pretty well. And he is not a Blackwater guy. He's actually, I support his shooting range situation. Okay, he's training law enforcement, military only. He won't bring in anybody who's out the street. He doesn't contract with, try to set up his own military little platoons. And he grew up in Coronado. He's a local guy. I think that he was actually outed by a Blackwater, operative who wanted out. We have another one, Wind Zero Incorporated. Here's Freeway 8. This is over the hill, go all the way over the mountains into the desert. Here's 98, which goes down to Mexicali. And this right in the crotch of this is this area here, which they want to make into a training, the same kind of thing, a racetrack and a shooting range, but they've scaled it way down. And you go out there, you see that the economy sucks, out in this desert area, and you feel for anything they can bring in, to the area. But, the problem is if they have a tendency to go toward this private platooning, that's the problem. We had a forum, our East County Democratic Club and cops had a forum, invited Blackwater. He decided not to show up. He said he had a schedule conflict, but then he was actually encouraging the rest of the people not to go. That guy, Mark Halcon, and actually the other guy from Wind Zero, they all showed up. Had 2 news crews there. Mike Lumpkin, who ran for office, was there and helped us out because he's got a background as a Navy SEAL commander and actually was helping select for contracts. At about that time, Blackwater started buying these Brazilian fighter planes, okay, to expand their Air Force. They already had quite a few of these type of helicopters, and they want to bring in these airships. Now, I was surprised when I mentioned this to crowds. This was a big deal for a lot of people because they're buying military hardware from out of the country. This is no longer a good thing for, they say, well, war is a good thing, it helps our economy. Not if you buy this stuff out of Brazil, it doesn't put anybody to work here. So people that work in the military-industrial complex thought this was a really, important slide. September 16th, the next month, we had this Nischor Square massacre, which hopefully you caught in the news. If you didn't catch this in the news, afterwards you can come over and I'll hit up your head on with a baseball bat. This is this corner, a picture of it called Nischor Square. And I'll go through some slides here to sort of show you what happened. They started this 30-minute shooting spree. They killed in cold blood a lot of civilians, 16, that weren't putting them under any duress. Blew up this car, for example. This was before it happened. This is where, somewhere in here is where they have a State Department official went into this compound for a meeting of some kind. Then there was a bomb explosion here that went off, a car bomb. There it's going off again, 11:53 a.m. Then this was the hole in the street. Then Blackwater was deployed to bring the official out. These are the heavy convoy going out, and these are the light-duty convoy. They came up to, here's where the bomb site was. They came up to this square right here, And then there was one car that, like, the guy's foot was stuck on the accelerator or something. It wasn't just crawling forward. And so they just shot through the window and killed him. And then they actually put a grenade into that later. So they did that. I'm not going to try to go through every gory detail of this. But this was investigated eventually, like a year and a half later, by the FBI. And these guys were, I was supposed to put pictures in here of them, but there was a few Blackwater contractors who were the ones guilty of doing this, okay, that the FBI said. And of course they said Blackwater is completely innocent. They had nothing to do with this at all. They had no responsibility. And I'm thinking, you know, they work for the company. They were trained by the company. The company has some culpability. Well, right after that, Erik Prince, first time to get a picture of the guy, went before the Henry Waxman Oversight Committee. Of course, they couldn't talk about the September 16th incident. They couldn't talk about the, well, they could have. They didn't ask any questions about Fallujah either. Meanwhile, they win $161 million government contracts, which were really suspicious, by the way. The two contracts, first, $137 million that were completed in 24 hours. Think about that. You get a contract for $137 million. Actually, it's two contracts cut in, so it's cut in two, so that neither one is more than $70 million, so that no one has to look at it at the higher level. That's when they look at it at the higher level. They completed these contracts either that day or the next day. $137 million for one day's work. I'd like to have that job. I don't even know what you do for that. They received another $23 million for missile defense R&D oversight, which they don't do missile defense, overhead, but they don't do missile defense R&D. So why are they getting the overhead? That's what I call a slush fund that they just, so this is $161 million in potentially just a payoff. Just a payoff. This is called legalized stealing. These companies are in bed with the government to steal from us. Make us feel very insecure, keep us insecure, oh, we're going to protect you, and we're going to steal from you at the same time. Here's an example of $161 million for one day's work. Luckily, we had our protest scheduled just that later that week. So we lucked out again. Of course, we planned this for 4 months. No one knew that. They thought that we just suddenly came up with this protest. Had 200 people walk a mile to the gate. Bob Dolner was there. When we got to the gate, they had this little line that they were tempting us to cross, and I had a confrontation with Bonfiglio here. No fist, Here's Blackwater mercenaries shooting protesters with his finger. This is about all they. This is how they react to everything. I think shooting. Okay, so that was September, October. Later in October, we had the firestorm. This Harris fire started right here. Here's the Blackwater site, only within a couple of miles. The tent city, I'll show you in a minute, was right down here. Burned 90,000 acres, 8 people died. And here's the interesting part. I just looked at this yesterday. No fire investigation report has been provided yet. The other fire investigation reports are huge. They talk about the Witch Creek fire and all these other fires. This one, we haven't completed that yet. So we don't know why this started. Makes you wonder. Makes you wonder because I'll show you why. It started right here. Had the wind not been as strong, it would have taken out this little pocket, which is the main part of the trail right here. But actually it came around, and this was early in the day. It actually came around and burned all around the valley, as you see here. These were active fires, you see those little spots. So after the fire was basically put down, they came in with their tent city. First of all, the Potrero area was isolated. Let me go over this one more time. The fire burned, this is the road. So when the fire was burning on this road, you couldn't get in there. Then it came around and burned the backside of the road. So they were isolated. They couldn't go in or out. We couldn't get in because we weren't news or people to get in there. So these people in Potrero were isolated. They weren't getting supplies. if you remember that, but we had the fire start basically Sunday, Monday time frame. They had people at Qualcomm Stadium who were getting relief. Remember, Schwarzenegger came down there. I think even Bush was flying around somewhere. But they said, okay, we're going to close the Qualcomm Stadium Relief Center because we need the game that happened on Sunday. You know, we need to get it back for game mode. Meanwhile, we still couldn't get into Potrero. Everybody was being sent home, and Potrero was still isolated. Blackwater VP, that Bonfiglio guy, came, and he was the first to provide fuel and food from his Hummer as he handed out little pins and hats and stuff. Blackwater, you know, the people there hated Blackwater. They don't want him around. But they're willing to take the, you know, water if they had to have it. This tent city was established using Blackwater tents. All of a sudden, we didn't have any tents. All of the military everywhere, no tents at all. We had to go to Blackwater for them. They were going to ask the voters to complete their recall ballot sitting inside the tents. Now, here's a problem I found out. There's no central office to coordinate relief. Fire relief, you go to your elected official, and they get to give it out to you for votes, basically. You know, you want some relief? Then think of me when you vote. So, to counteract the Blackwater relief scam, we got this largest U-Haul truck we could find, and we found a source of supplies, and we delivered about 8 tons of food. I drove a truck 35 miles an hour going up the hill. So the recall election happened December 11th. This was the very first election after the Deborah Bowen, our new Secretary of State, said that the electronic voting machines weren't going to be used. And so they did all the counting by hand on paper ballots. And I was in there, and this is another one of our projects with cops. We actually videotaped the entire thing, including the ballots, what was on them. And so we've since had a proposal for how to handle elections in the future. If you want to know anything about that or become a volunteer for election integrity, contact me afterwards. We have stuff for you to do. So 70% landslide. These people were ejected. 70% of the community, when they were asked to vote on it, they said, no, we don't want Blackwater here. And they did it really fast. The election was the 11th, and on the 13th, the next meeting, no longer there. The new people were in. Jan Hedlund's for the new members in. This guy here I want to mention because Carl Meyer was the guy who was the lead proponent of the recall and was very active to help the whole community get through that. So here's the new members. They met a couple of times. We had a guy who was actually Hollingsworth's right-hand man, in Senator Hollingsworth. It turns out he was actually being paid by Blackwater during this time to be their PR person. And he objected to the reconsideration because it was the wrong reaction. And actually, he was right. But it didn't matter. They were going to be hearing that on March 13th with the full complement of members who were going to vote no. And so Blackwater pulled their project on Friday just before that. They always do, corporations always get about bad news on Friday, so people ignore it. But in the next meeting, the Potrero Community Planning Group reconsidered it anyway, defeating it 9-0 as a symbolic gesture. You had a few people in the crowd saying, no, that's, you know, you can't do that, you know. And I learned that one of those persons who lived in Potrero and was the most vocal for this, Potrero, remember, is only 850 people. That person used to live in Moyock, North Carolina, right next to the Blackwater installation there, and happened to move to Potrero just before they started their project, and was the most adamant for it, involved in everything. I find that very hard to believe, first of all, that anybody would move to Potrero to begin with, even though it's a nice place. But if you hear, I moved to Potrero, how rare is that? I mean, you never hear it. And then if you say, I moved from Moyock, when did you hear that? To put both of those together in time with Blackwater moving there is incomprehensible that it was just by chance. Yeah.
I just comment, follow the money trail.
Yeah, well, we can't get that money because it's a private organization. We can't look at it. We had a reconciliation party afterwards. Here's Bob Filner. Here's a group here. Steve Coet, professor here at this college. Who knows Steve Cohen? Award-winning poet. Get to know him, he's a nice guy. He lives out in Potrero. So he was very interested in defeating this as well. Carol Jankow with the San Diego Peace Resource Center, Susan Friedman of Activist San Diego. All these people were really, really helpful in getting this thing done. And of course the community planning group, and Jan Hedlund she was on the hot seat. She was the only person who would stand up against it. 1 month later, exactly, this was our party, March. Next month, we find the secret facility in Otay Mesa, fingered by somebody who said he was the ex-Blackwater employee, wanted to tell us about it. People that used to work for Blackwater and don't like the scene, don't like it anymore. And by the way, I've had a lot of those contacts lately. We saw this big ventilation system. What is this? Ventilation for a tunnel going under the border? I thought, yeah, they're probably running drugs back then. I didn't know. It was for their shooting range. What they did was they missed the plan. They said, we're missing all the plans. You can't look at anything. We lost them. We learned our lesson. Don't tell them that you know about it until you look at all of their plans, and then go to the media. Because as soon as you go to the media and you blow the whistle on it, you're not going to get any information to lock it up. The plans, the paper plans, said they're going to install a shooting range, whereas the computer record said modular training unit. How did that happen? Must have been a city employee saying, oh, Blackwater wants this changed. It's the computer record, so Lutz and his people won't find out about it. So the city was involved. Here's where it is. Here's the border. Just a little bit up. There's right there. This is the Otay Mesa Border Patrol Office, just 2 doors away. And I don't know where the Southwestern deal is out here, Gigantic Street. I'm not sure which street that is, but it's somewhere nearby. They used phony names to do this. E&J Holdings out of Puerto Rico, Shell Corporation, Raven Development, Southwest Law Enforcement. Oh, that sounds just like Southwestern College. That's probably what it is, you might think. No, it was 2 guys who lived up in Huntington Beach in the garage. First 2 permits didn't mention any shooting range or anything. It was just ventilation and wall construction. No shooting range on the computer records anyway. So we had a news conference. Here was everybody saying, this is ridiculous. And the city council was very much behind this, saying, look, you guys cannot go in and just piecemeal your project and say a little ventilation system, a little electrical work, and not come in and say, here's what we want to put in, and let us review it. Yeah, maybe it's okay. Maybe the public would say we like this here. But first, you've got to let them see what it is. So the way they did it was wrong. Van Hueso, the new president of the city council, that's his area. He was very adamant about this. He says, I just spent 3 years working with the people south of the border to tell them how calm this area is. And now we have Blackwater coming in here. So they used the federal courts on this. We got on Democracy Now! That on May 2nd, talking about it. Sanders requested an inquiry after we submitted petitions to him. You know, this is what they do a lot. Okay, we're starting an inquiry. An inquiry's been started. I can't comment on it. Oh, the inquiry's still going. That's done over there. By the way, keep doing it, Blackwater. The inquiry's going. That'll keep everybody busy. This is what they do a lot. Oh, the inquiry's going on. It's just BS is what it is. GSA, during that time, look, GSA inspected it. They got the chain link fence involved. I filed an appeal to the permits, which wasn't really valid, but I did it anyway. Blackwater got a contract extension, I understand, on May 15th. Mike Aguirre submitted a report saying it was wrong, and said that he considered a stop work order, but he never did submit the order. So he said to the press, I'm going to give a stop work order, but he didn't do it. This is, remember, the election was June 3rd or June 2nd or something. So this is right before the heat of the election time. Finally, on May 20th, the DSD director said, no, this is ridiculous. What you're trying to put in here is completely out of whack. This is not what you said it was going to be. Warfare training facility, that isn't what you said here. So he said no. So they took it to federal court. before Marilyn Huff, appointed by the ex-president's father, George H.W. Bush. So she was already ready to vote for, you know, to rule. I mean, it was I thought she was very ridiculous, and I went to her, how she was catering to them. Michael Neal, retired Marine Brigadier General. Oh, man, anybody that's in the military, don't you have to just follow your needs and start worshiping the guy if he has that many stars around his head? So they decided that the feds had jurisdiction to decide the ministerial means it's just a rubber stamp permit. What they did was they said, the city says, this is just so standard operation. Blackwater says, too bad. We were going to enforce it. Federal court from way up here come in and tell the city what to do. The city said no. Mike Aguirre said, you're out of your jurisdiction. We have a city. We get to decide what our permits go in or not. Not the federal government. Look, if you're a conservative person and you want separation of federal and state, you're very conservative, you'd be against this. This is not a liberal thing. This is really bad. Aguirre appealed, but the new city attorney, Goldsmith, dropped the case. In fact, he made it a campaign issue. Blackwater wins it for now, but we're not going to stop just because they won this in a ridiculous way. That they're going to try to do is come into this institution here and make it seem like they're legitimate, when they went into this in a very illegitimate fashion. Well, they lost their Grizzly urban assault vehicle contract that they were going for. These vehicles are, hopefully we're not going to see these roaming the streets here in Chula Vista. But I mean, it's I guess a good idea that they want to avoid the IUD, the improvised explosive, or IED, improvised explosive devices. But they pretty much have changed it because they said that medium-weight vehicles really, you know, you can just fire one of these missiles into this thing, you know, one of these shoulder-fired missiles, they're over with. They're not hardy enough for real combat situations. So I don't know what they're going to do. This November. That's very recent, right? We're only in April. Then we find out about the Procinctu group in Riverside, and yet another training camp. I should have a map of exactly where it is. This is what their situation is going to sort of look like. That's what the terrain looks like today. And they said these hills look like Afghanistan, so it'd be nice. Citizens Against Private Armies has formed up there to try to fight this. Now, just in February, maybe you heard this news, Blackwater changed their name to Z, X-E. Z. Okay. Now, they did have a problem because the word Blackwater, what's it mean? Sewage. It's what you flush out of the toilet. That's called Blackwater. You know, you have a gray water system. That's for your laundry machine. Blackwater is laced with human feces, usually, is what you think of. So the word Blackwater was never a good name from the very start. But we're used to it, so we don't actually, well, we kind of think of feces and water, you know. So, but they're trying to just clean this up. So they said, we're going to change our name to Z, and that's going to solve all of our PR problems, because the public will forget. And a lot of times the public will. They changed their Blackwater Lodge and Training Center to U.S. Training Center. That sounds pretty legitimate. Sounds like a U.S. And they probably have lots of flags and everything flying. So they look just like the military. People that don't know say, I'm in the military and I like flags. And therefore I like Blackwater. No, it's a wrong conclusion. They're going to have a problem. Look at this picture. Here's Erik Prince standing on a granite floor, decorated. This must have cost a fortune. Put in inlay this granite Blackwater logo in the floor of their facility. They're going to have to take that all out and put this new logo in there, I guess. Then they hired the ex-VP of DHL. DHL folded. You know, they decided to close. So the DHL guy was hired as the president of XE. I think it was his requirement that they would change the name and kind of clean up their act. So now we're up to recent events. Blackwater and Southwestern College. Is it a marriage? Is it a heart? Right? what they did was in the agreement, if you read the agreement, which is on our website, and I guess you can pick it up here too, they said it was a no-cost deal with Southwestern College to use their shooting range. No cost to the college. But they actually said that they would be reimbursed. Will be reimbursed. That sounds like a cost to me. That way they can avoid all of the bidding process that's normal and see maybe somebody else wants to do it for cheaper. Maybe they'll pay us. Maybe we'll make money on the deal. They had an arbitration clause. Well, for what if it's at no cost? You need to arbitrate nothing? North Carolina laws, instead of California, was in there. A gag order on the Board of Governors. Okay. I guess, well, that thing's long gone. We'll just leave it there. The gag order said the governing board could not discuss this with anybody unless they had a written agreement from Blackwater to do so.
It's still going.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, okay, I guess, well, as soon as that cuts out, I want to change the date. We're almost done. The other thing it lets Blackwater do is to use on-campus conference rooms for anything they want and for no limited amount of time. The funny thing is they have a $66,000 square foot facility in Otay Mesa with tons of space for conference rooms. You can set up a place for all kinds of people there. So why would they want it? The only thing, okay, now let me step through this. What's your question now?
Did Blackwater give money to Southwestern College?
I don't know. I don't know if they did pay somebody off, but according to the agreement, according to the agreement, there was not going to be any money change hands except that the college was going to pay them. The college was going to pay them. That's what they had set up.
I'm supposedly they were going to allow the college to use their firing range.
The college could use their firing range for their courses. But they could also come on campus. Now what they should have done, if they didn't like this agreement, was they should have reconsidered it. Because you can do that at the very next meeting of your board. At that meeting, or the very next meeting, you can say, I want to reconsider what our vote was. And then they take it up again. And they either vote up or down. The same agreement would be voted up or down. They should have voted it down. If they didn't like it, it gets voted down. Then they can renegotiate. You don't have an agreement that's halfway agreed to, which is what they did. What they did was, they said, well, we don't like 10 things in the agreement, and so we're going to renegotiate it. But they didn't actually vote it down. So they did it wrong. Now, this is not, I don't know if they've actually started to use the facility out there or not. I don't know if money has changed hands or what kind of communication. However, we did put in a records request to the college based on the California Public Records Act, which allows us, as a public institution, we ask for all the information that went from Blackwater to the board back and forth. We want to see every email and communication and their logs of any meetings that they had. And we had one of the guys here at the board member, I can't tell you his name, but who said, oh, I got this little email from Blackwater, I'd like to read it here. Well, when that happens, you can say, even in the meeting, I want to have a copy of it. And they're supposed to give it to you right there. Well, I said, I will especially want that, but everything else too. And they definitely have to give me that. And they since have said, we're working on it, which is a good sign, you know, except that they're delaying it by saying that. Now, if they did it right, no agreement would be in place at this time. I don't know what your disposition is. I mean, at the end of this meeting, you didn't know what was happening. It was such a mess. They weren't clear about what they were doing. It's my view and other people's view that this agreement should be stopped completely. There's no reason that a public institution should do this. Yes?
I think the point made in the back of the room was a really cogent one.
that this is a win-win just for Blackwater. They're trying to relabel their facility as an occupational trade training facility rather than the point you made earlier as a mercenary training facility. And by their tying it with Southwestern College, over and above all recruiting opportunities, they're using Southwestern College to clean up their image. And there's nothing positive in this for Southwestern College.
Now, they will, if you go to their website, Blackwater Otay Mesa, they'll take anybody. You can walk up to their door and say, I want to take your course. You could be the guy, you know, who's a little bit deranged, who now learns how to breach doors and how to break into houses with a shotgun. Do you want that?
Can we do it? Can we do it?
Let's do it. Yeah.
That's a very good question. Is there adequate range space? We said we closed a lot of the bases. There's not enough ranges. Maybe we could set up a range under public control on a government property that we can oversee, which is where we can have our shooting range trained. I got no problem with law enforcement and military learning to shoot a gun. I don't want them walking around the streets never shooting their gun. They hardly ever shoot them anyway. You go up to a random police officer, have you ever used your gun? No. Usual answer. You know, so they need to have some practice using their guns, no question about it.
I'm not sure the question is even if it's important. The question might be, did Southwestern run into using a tainted facility? Are there not other facilities that might be used that don't bring with them the baggage of Blackwater? I think that there are probably other very viable alternatives out there. And this one, I'm not sure Southwestern really understood what it was walking into when it became involved with this.
You know, basically what they got was, you know, the agenda packet. It's this real thick thing that they're supposed to read, which they know. And they just review it. It says at the top, no cost agreement. Okay, I'm not going to read the rest of it. And then they vote for it. And now they said, well, gee, after I read it, 9 of the provisions are not agreeable to me. And they shot it down themselves. So let me just make sure. There was a question here. They get to use the shooting range. The school, this is their one benefit. In the contract, though, that they had, the school was going to pay Blackwater for personnel costs while they used it. They had these arbitration clause in a word venue, a gag order, so that the board couldn't say anything at all. Ridiculous. But this is typical of Blackwater, how they overstep. You know, they're so audacious with what they're doing. They always overstep the logic of what a normal person would do. And to use the on-campus conference rooms, that's one thing so they can say, well, we're on campus, we're legitimate. They really wanted that. So I don't think this thing should be approved. I would hate to see, you know, maybe there's a thing where they have to have it for a short time before they find something else. It doesn't even sound like that. It sounds like they still have a shooting range that they can use, and if not, we'll find one. Because we can find a shooting range somewhere for them to use that's not going to be impactful, and they'll probably get it donated. Okay, let me see if I got what else here. What did I do? Go the wrong way? Let me just finish and then we'll go on to questions, okay? Because I'm almost done. The latest. This, I just made the slide today. They're building a training camp in Los Coyotes Reservation near Warner Springs. I talked to the tribal members there, and they haven't approved it, they said. They're still building. So this is still kind of secret, but it'll come out in the news. Watch the news about this. This is going to be coming out shortly. And then it's going to be a big deal. They were birded out of Iraq, remember, right? When Obama took power, they said, you're finally out. But Triple Canopy is taking over the contracts. Just today I saw this. So what's going to happen? The private contractors are just going to go from one company to the next. Umbrella. No change in real anything. It's still out of control. We have no control over this vast number. About half of the people over there are private contractors with no real chain of command control. The lawsuit with the Fallujah families, still in process. They haven't completed that. It was 2003. We're 5 years into this. And they've been delaying. The families, the September 16th families, filed in San Diego. They filed here. So I haven't even gotten this lawsuit out yet. I mean, that was one of my steps. I was going to look into the files and pull it out and see what it is. You can get them, all of them. Blackwater is still under scrutiny. More so for this 2006 murder. Remember the Christmas murder? They're saying that it was a complete cover-up and Blackwater is culpable for that. So they're really in bad scene on that. And as I said, this entire murk industry is starting to blow apart at the seams because people are getting ready to come forward and say, look, I committed atrocities I'm ashamed of and I want to come clean. They say they're going to give oversight. So they've been under control of the State Department, Condoleezza Rice. As I said, Rumsfeld wouldn't support Rice, so she went to the private security firm. That's the reason they got started. But now the Pentagon agrees to oversee now. Erik Prince says he likes oversight. Best thing he ever heard of. Unfortunately, the oversight has been outsourced to yet another firm, Aegis of Britain. So the oversight of the mercenary firms is going to another mercenary firm. And they're perfectly out. So we're a mercenary firm, they say. There's no, ifs, ands, or buts from their view. Because they're from Britain, hired on by the United States. There's no question about that. So we have this chilling consolidation of mercenary army power. This could be a big problem. This is what I'm afraid of, is that these firms that are in it for money will start to deteriorate our security such that they can make even more and more and more. It's like setting fires if you're a firefighter. You make more money when it happens. Another film I didn't really like, but it actually points it out, is The Gangs in New York, where the fire brigades fight each other and set the fires and stuff. In New York, it used to be how it runs. And then I'm saying here that become a citizens oversight participant and get involved in the meetings. And certainly this next meeting of this college board would be 1 to 10. It doesn't matter which side you're on. Come and see what happens, see what they do. And what's best is if you read the agendas and speak to the issues and try to, because as I said, most of these bodies have no one ever show up. No citizen ever shows up to most meetings. So it's just some official sitting around a table. No one there. Get one person show up and just sit there. That changes the meeting. Bring a camera, changes it even more. And that's it for the presentation. Now, other questions? Yes, in the back.